For the first time in the history of the sport, the FIFA World Cup is coming to Canada. 48 nations, 104 matches, billions of viewers worldwide. And Toronto and Vancouver are about to appear on the biggest sports stage this planet has ever seen. Everyone assumed this was America's tournament to dominate. They were utterly incorrect. Here is what the headlines are missing. Canada is hosting 13 World Cup matches, including knockout rounds. BMO Field in Toronto has been transformed into an international standard venue that impressed every FIFA inspector who walked through it. BC Place in Vancouver, a climate-controlled arena surrounded by mountains, is being called one of the most spectacular World Cup settings ever assembled. Canada's national team is playing all three of their group stage matches on home soil, and the tournament opens with Mexico at the legendary Azteca Stadium, the cathedral where Pelé and Maradona made history. Now, connect this to what is happening politically. While FIFA was selecting Canadian cities for the world's premier sporting event, Donald Trump was on Truth Social calling Mark Carney a governor. He was posting altered maps showing Canada absorbed into America. He was calling our country the 51st state, and the entire world was watching. Here is the irony that no one is reporting. The man who says Canada is not a real country just watched FIFA confirm that Canada is important enough to host the largest World Cup ever organized. 48 nations are sending their best athletes to Canadian stadiums. Billions of people will see Toronto's skyline and Vancouver's mountains on their screens. That is not the treatment you give a state. That is the treatment you give a sovereign nation. If you want to follow every development as Canada takes the world stage, subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover this daily. Now let me show you the numbers behind this, because the scale is extraordinary. Let me break this down because the details matter. This is the biggest World Cup ever organized. The tournament runs from June 11th to July 19th across 16 cities in 3 countries. 11 in the United States, 3 in Mexico, 2 in Canada. The expansion from 32 teams to 48 means there are 40 more matches than the last World Cup in Qatar. This is an entirely different scale. Canada's involvement is not symbolic. Toronto hosts the opening Canadian match on June 12th at BMO Field. Then Vancouver takes over tent at BC Place. Canada's group includes Switzerland and Qatar, with a 4th team still to be decided through playoffs that could bring Italy to Canadian soil. Think about that for a moment. Italy, 4-time world champions, potentially playing in Toronto. And here is where Carney's background becomes critical. This is a prime minister who ran the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. He understands what a global event of this magnitude means for economic positioning. The estimated economic impact for host cities runs into the billions. Hotel bookings, tourism infrastructure, international broadcast rights, corporate sponsorships. Every dollar spent by the hundreds of thousands of international fans arriving in Toronto and Vancouver flows directly into Canadian businesses. While Trump was slapping tariffs on Canadian goods and threatening our sovereignty, Carney was coordinating with FIFA to ensure Canadian venues exceeded every international standard. While Washington was creating chaos and global trade, Ottawa was preparing to welcome the world. But here's the part nobody's talking about. The knockout rounds. Canada is not just hosting group stage matches. Both Toronto and Vancouver have been assigned knockout round fixtures. When the tournament reaches its decisive phase, when elimination matches determine which nations survive, some of those matches will be played on Canadian soil. Canadian crowds will be part of football's most dramatic moments. And this is where it gets really interesting. Here is where it gets fascinating. Do you see what is happening here? Step 1. Trump insults Canadian sovereignty repeatedly. Step 2. The world takes notice. Step 3. International organizations begin treating Canada not as America's junior partner, but as an independent nation worthy of the global stage. Step 4. FIFA confirms Canada as co-host of the largest World Cup ever. Step 5. Billions of viewers worldwide will watch Canadian cities, hear Canadian crowds, and witness Canadian excellence on screen for 39 consecutive days. That sequence is not coincidence. It is consequence. The more Trump diminished Canada on the world stage, the more the world elevated Canada in response. The same pattern we're seeing with the European Union. The same dynamic playing out in NATO. The same shift reshaping trade alliances across the Pacific. Canada is being recognized as a serious, sovereign, capable nation precisely because someone tried to say it was not. Now here's the contrast that should make every Canadian pay attention. Canada has never hosted a FIFA World Cup. Not once in the tournament's 96-year history. This is new territory. And Canada did not receive this opportunity through politics. It earned it through preparation. FIFA inspectors praised Canadian venues. Security planning exceeded requirements. Infrastructure upgrades completed on schedule. Critics argue Canada is too small a football nation to matter on this stage. The data says otherwise. Canadian youth football participation has tripled in the past decade. The national team qualified for Qatar 2022 after the 36 years of absence. Professional leagues are expanding, and now 13 World Cup matches will be played on Canadian soil, permanently embedding Canada into football's global story. Is this World Cup the moment Canada becomes a permanent fixture in global football, or is it a one-time event? Drop your answer in the comments. But here's the part that should make every Canadian pay attention. Let me show you what this means in concrete terms. The economic impact of hosting World Cup matches is not theoretical. When Germany hosted in 2006, the economic benefit exceeded $12 billion. When Brazil hosted in 2014, tourism revenues broke national records. When Qatar hosted in 2022, the infrastructure investment transformed the entire country. Now multiply that by the scale of a 48-team tournament across 3 nations. For Toronto alone, estimates project over $1 billion in direct economic activity. Hotels fully booked for weeks. Restaurants operating at capacity. Transportation systems serving hundreds of thousands of international visitors. Retail spending from fans representing dozens of countries. Vancouver projects similar numbers, with the added advantage of being one of the most visually spectacular host cities in World Cup history. And here is where the permanence becomes real. Once those matches are played, once those broadcasts air, once those billions of viewers see Canadian cities on their screens, that image is locked in forever. No tariff, no social media post, no political insult can undo the fact that Canada hosted the World Cup. That is already built into history. Meanwhile, this tournament arrives at a moment when Canada is diversifying everything. Trade partnerships, defense alliances, diplomatic relationships. The World Cup is not just sport. It is a projection of national capability. When a country successfully hosts matches at this level, it signals to the world, we can organize, we can deliver, we can operate on the global stage. Let that sink in. Mexico understood this when they hosted in 1970 and 1986. Those tournaments are still referenced today, decades later. Canada is about to create the same kind of permanent legacy. The stadiums, the moments, the goals scored on Canadian soil, all of that becomes part of football's permanent record. So where does this end? The answer is permanent. The end game is clear. On June 12, 2026, when the referee blows the whistle at BMO Field in Toronto for Canada's opening World Cup match, something irreversible happens. A country that was told it was too small, too dependent, too tied to its southern neighbor to matter on the global stage steps into the spotlight in front of billions of people. And that moment does not expire. Trump can post whatever he wants on Truth Social. He can call our prime minister a governor. He can draw maps that erase our borders. None of that changes the fact that FIFA, the organization that governs the most popular sport on earth, looked at Canada and said, "You are ready. You are worthy. You are a host nation." And here's what makes this different from every other sovereignty story. Trade deals can be renegotiated. Tariffs can be reimposed. Diplomatic relationships can shift with elections. But the 2026 World Cup happens once. It is already locked into the global sports calendar. The venues are confirmed. The schedule is published. The tickets are selling. No executive order undoes that. Carney understood something that Trump never grasped. Sovereignty is not just about borders and tariffs. It is about standing on the world stage and delivering. It is about showing billions of people that your country can organize, can host, can welcome the world with excellence. While Trump was diminishing Canada with words, Canada was elevating itself with actions. While Washington was creating trade chaos, Ottawa was preparing world-class venues. While the American administration was calling Canada a state, FIFA was calling Canada a host nation. Everything I have shown you tonight comes from public reporting, but the conclusions are mine. You decide what it means. If this analysis opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe if you have not already. And our last video covered the European Parliament's historic 482 to 108 vote to make Canada their closest strategic partner. Link is on screen. Watch it now. This is Voice of Canada.